Hello, everybody. Here with another iLab interview, fireside chat, or what is really just a continuation of a conversation that I've been having with someone who's become a good friend of mine, Michel-Ange K. Michel-Ange, how you doing?
I'm doing good, Anthony. It's good to be here with you.
Very good, very good. Now, we've known each other for how long? 3 years, 4 years?
About 4 years it's been.
About 4 years now. You are a filmmaker, amongst other things, and developed an interest in hypnosis, hypnotherapy, had a bit of an experience and a result yourself some years back. One way or another, that led you to a little crew of street hypnotists, which had essentially disbanded by that point. But you sought me out. We had a pretty deep conversation right off the bat, and you came to London. We hung out, and we've been, again, continuing that conversation ever since. We've collaborated a little on one of your projects, the Black Box, which I'd love to talk about. You have, along the way, brought different strands of your search, journey, knowledge, information together into what you call ancestral hypnosis. We're going to chat about that later on. Why don't you tell me a little bit about how, why this thing, why hypnosis kind of grabbed you in the first place?
I would like to permit myself right now. Many of us know you as a hypnotist. Many people coming on right now are interested in hypnosis or interested in experiencing a change.
Mm-hmm.
And they might be thinking, just like me, in participating in this interview, that something positive can come out of this for me, my life road. And they may have read, before clicking on here, that it's going to involve something called ancestral hypnosis. Since we know how words are powerful, well, maybe we don't know how words are powerful. I mean, those are words when I say that.
Yep.
We really know how powerful words are, I want to invite everyone who's listening right now to let that word ancestral hypnosis do its work. Maybe it's a heavier word than we think. Maybe when we call something or we click something on the screen, it comes up faster, more powerful than we might have bargained for. And we can allow that to do its work. Mm-hmm. So that while we go through the interview, everything that you and I are going to be talking about, we'll be able to serve whatever that means for the people listening. So whatever you and I are going to talk about can make whatever experience they came for even stronger. Now, this may sound like I'm doing some hypnosis trick, but in truth, to me, there's no such thing as hypnosis. That's what I've come through. What I've come to is to be confronted by the raw power of this life that's unfolding. I won't even say the raw power of words, because words can't know what words are. So that's what I've been brought to from hanging out with the likes of you, Anthony, and the likes of the people who are watching this, is really coming to a place of how miraculous our life is.
And you're right, words are loaded, and there's a possibility I may have just skipped on straight past this if I hadn't gone deeper on you with regard to the word ancestral. I would have perhaps just wrapped that up as past life regression, and may have had a bit of an aversion to it, but you have, deepened my understanding of that word and the expression of the ancestor. However, I can't let you just run on from there is no such thing as hypnosis. So tell me what you mean when you say that.
What do you mean when you say that? I think it's much more honest to talk about what I mean when I say that. I think it's much more honest to say that there's no such thing as hypnosis. That's a word, hypnosis. It's a word that we're responding to when we use it. It's not a thing.
Right.
But there's a word, and people use other words in order to provoke change. They may talk about the Holy Spirit. They may talk about your higher power. They may talk about the spirit in this room. They may talk about the love that's happening between us, baby. They may talk about the hate I feel for you. Mm-hmm. People use words in order to go there. They may say you're unconscious in the Freudian sense. Now your unconscious will be able to speak. As you lay down on that couch, you'll be able to let things come up from your unconscious. You know, but can any of these words know what these words mean? We can't really know about what's happening in the subjective realm. We can work together to describe a hammer or a plate or some other kind of tool. But in order to really show how this perspective came to me, I can tell you a bit about my background with the hypnosis and how I got to know you, how I came to this relationship. You know, ancestrally, when people come to a ceremony, and we all recognize that intrinsically, the fundamental therapeutic art is that of hospitality, of being greeted. You know, even when we do parts therapy, we're talking to a part and we're treating it with respect. A lot of us, there's parts of us that have risen up to our defense that we may demonize, but maybe those are parts of us that haven't been treated with respect, you know? And so when people come to a ceremony, one of the first duties is to explain the whole spiral of how they found themselves here in this relationship with you.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the real meaning of the hypnotic spiral, is that, as the ancients used to say, as above, so below, as within, so without, as though time, the past, the future, me and you culminate in what we're doing in the dance right now. We have agency about our past. And so therefore, courtesy and honoring the meeting is extraordinarily impactful. I mean, we see that in Rogers in therapy and other humanistic therapies, honoring what's coming up. We hear the word these days, holding the space. So when I go back to how I met you, and to give respect to that, it all started, I was working on a film project, and I had a foundation in New York City who were fascinated by what was happening with that work. And there's a kind of visionary aspect in my films, you know. Ever since I came to film, I realized that we can make a waking dream with a film. But then I realized I wanted to experience that waking dream while writing. And I think all of us who have the creative impulse, and I think we all have the creative impulse, but those of us who've gone a bit further and explored it explicitly, picking up a guitar, writing a poem, performing hypnosis, magic.
Yeah.
We're interested in that magic of what's coming up and dancing with it. We may even be really good at some kind of protocol of control or some trick, but really it's because we're fascinated with what you call the ambiguity between doing and happening. The divination aspect of flipping a coin and working with the outcome, whatever comes up. It's something very survival based, in being able to read the signs, yet own the fact that we read the signs. We got the message about Noah's Ark. When I was a kid, I used to have this dream that, you know, back in the late 80s and 90s, Black people would go to these party sound systems. There'd always be like this hand-drawn flyer with some scantily clad lady and a big speaker and maybe a Rasta style lion on there about such and such Majesty sound system party, $5 entry. And I had a dream, almost like Parliament Funkadelic. I had a dream that the mothership had come and that all the Black people had taken the mothership and that I hadn't gotten the flyer, missed out on the flyer. Wow. And I've been waiting like E.T. phone home ever since to get to find my way to the beam that nourishes me. And so I've always been interested in trusting what comes up creatively and marveling at what happens. Every one of us therapeutically, we survive our sessions, and our sessions are grace. We're not using some protocol on somebody. We're honoring the living spirit of what's taking place between us and another person. And I don't know what I mean when I say the living spirit. That's the point. Real respect means I'm not going to say it's my chakras or it's my this or my third eye or my past life, or even the word ancestor is a pointer. The reason I use the word ancestor is just because indeed there's in fact no belief involved. We're all from someone. We're all already included before we even knew the word included. Yeah. And we know that anything we do or say has an impact. And so to continue the yarn, continue the story as it unfolds, what do y'all think is coming next? And so hypnosis, the foundation that I was working with funded me in my artistic research about hypnosis. I don't know where the idea came from, The idea came from me, but a couple of months before, I wasn't thinking about hypnosis.
Yeah.
There had been aspects of hypnosis in films that I'd seen that I'd made before, hints at hypnosis, but there were hints about a lot of other things. Who knows which one of those plants would have grown? So it turned out that the hypnosis thing came into my life, came into this world. And I said to them, why don't, they could fund any kind of creative endeavor that would be, nourish the film project. And I said, why not fund me to learn about hypnosis, to get trained in hypnosis? And I went and got trained in New York City at the NLP Center in New York, in Manhattan. These are people who were from the Stephen Gilligan lineage of NLP.
Okay.
And I fell in love at first bite with hypnosis. I don't know if that's been your experience with some people out there, that there was a moment you might have read about it. It's almost like you got the flyer, but when you got to the party, you felt the bite.
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell you about that bite, the nature of that bite. I wonder if anyone else listening has had that experience. If there was a man in front of us in the classroom teaching, and he was sharing about hypnosis, but he was opening us up, hinting at it in his demeanor and in his choice of words, in his emphasis and his gaze. It could have been also the fact that we all wanted to learn something. You know, when the two meet, something takes place. Mm-hmm. At that moment, I was very, very interested in what this hypnosis thing could be and what it could do for me. And he seemed to be there, implicitly holding the space for something to happen with his gaze, with his tone. There's no particular trick he did, or his wife. They were a duo, but there was somehow that they awakened in me a deeper sense that there's something going on with my own language. This was the big Ericksonian insight that I had, the big hypnotic insight that stays with me to this day, is that there's the way that I experience certain words won't be the way someone else experiences certain words. And so there's a subjective, suggestive, and poetic power that's taking place all the time. Like you often quote Terence McKenna, it could be that the world is made of words if we only use the right ones. And I'll tell you which ones are the right ones. They're yours. And they're not even any particular words. I don't think this is about studying somebody's patterns of language. Mm-hmm. It's about somehow tickling the part of them that knows that it's being listened to. It's making the person feel aware that their language, or whatever's behind the idea of language, that they're being listened to, spoken to directly. And I discovered the power of that in that training. And somewhere in that training, a guy said to me, yeah, man, but there's these dudes in London that just walk up to people and just drop them off. And I'm like, what is that about? They were talking about some street hypnotists in London. And almost impishly, it was the contrast to this very gentle, careful, ecological, Ericksonian concern with this unconscious that we don't want to, we want to tread softly on. There's these other people out there that are just dropping motherfuckers. And
did you watch a clip? Did you catch one of our early videos or something?
Soon I watched the Learn to Hypnotize videos, you know? And there's lots of other videos, because if I clicked on those, doubtless there are other people doing direct hypnosis, because I'd like for those who are coming in right now to contrast what I experienced. I experienced an idea of indirect hypnosis, meaning not so much the ritual, but an emphasis on being aware of the power of people's own language, to what seemed to me at the time an emphasis on the ability to create rituals that will encourage people to experience phenomena, explicit phenomena right here and now. As a matter of fact, the leveraging of phenomena, of bodily phenomena, was what I thought I was understanding as being direct hypnosis practiced by Anthony and his cohorts. But again, and I want to underline this out of respect to you and for our meeting, that there's a lot of people out there doing that, and my YouTube click train could have taken me any number of wormholes. But what I saw, and I think that becomes even more important at this time for everyone listening, is that we are gathered here listening. And what I saw, Anthony, was you and your friends having fun with your minds and the minds of your participants. And I think that's what drew me to you. I saw warmth, camaraderie, playfulness about this mind, well-meaningness, and which in fact seem a contrast to sometimes the almost spookily priestly way that some Ericksonian indirect therapists treat what they think is some knowledge that's so sacrosanct that perhaps they are the ones who know about it. I mean, there's some people who will not even train you in hypnosis unless you are a doctor, whereas there's some doctors that were complicit in the Holocaust.
So you sense this curiosity, playfulness. We often come back to those terms, and for me, they're healthy, and I like to, operate from that place. Even now, I'm happy to kind of let ideas go that I have perhaps put into that sacrosanct place now and again. So what did you hope to find when you came to London? Did you just want to be part of the gang?
No, it's not so much that. What I saw in the gang is an even deeper level of, in fact, we can talk about my journey as a journey in permissiveness. Initially, as I'm telling you, from the indirect hypnosis exploration or consideration, I had the idea that words are more powerful than I could have suspected up to then. There's more going on here, which means there's an idea I didn't really underline perhaps enough. My initial interaction with trained hypnotherapists in the indirect tradition gave me a deeply validating sense of the power of my own words that they're having on me.
Yep.
There's something very impactful. Maybe some people experience that with a psychoanalyst, but implicitly. Whereas someone training you in words as such can really awaken to you the aspect that in a sense, you're also doing this. There's something happening now. Not just some story that this is the veneer of, and we're going to find out what happened when I was 12 years old, but that there is a creative creative generative act taking place right now. Now, what I loved about seeing the punk rockedness of you and your gang, as for even the hat you're still wearing, you still have that playful, one of the gang aspect. You know, some of us who have done initiatic voyages or psychedelic voyages, or perhaps other forms of near psychotic experience or edge of life experience have noticed the phenomenon of elves, demons, cherubs, angels, little friends, smurfs. There's Papa Smurf, Brainy Smurf, Courageous Smurf. Mm-hmm. There's all these different smurfs, different aspects of our being. And so when you see this idea of the joyful tribe gathered together, it can almost give us permission to go do Clockwork Orange when we see a gang of lads and gals having fun, playing costumes. When we were little kids, we loved to get in makeup and go have fun together. There's something about the committee in my mind, the village in my mind, that responds even more to the function of inclusion rather than some technology of conclusion, be it Ericksonian or other. Okay. So I saw in the form and when seeing you and your friends, I saw an embodiment of the playfulness that I yearned.
Nice. So,
and I continue to see it in this lab that we're a part of, is that spirit of having fun together, that our mind is a safe place to play around, and that even the parts that I demonize can have their say, that this World Federation wrestling match is playful enough for the different parts of me to work things out here.
Sure. So you came over with a project in mind, which you titled The Black Box, which has continued to kind of grow and take different forms. And sometimes we even have conversations about, exactly what it is or where it's going, or should it be this, should it be that? But you tell me, what is the black box?
Anthony, the black box is what we're looking into right now to hear you and I talking. It's the screen. The black box is the screen, and the screen itself is a metaphor for the screen of our mind. It's a shared space that we agree upon in which something important is taking place. And at that moment, we give ourselves permission to hone in on what's taking place in that shared space. In that sense, it's the descendant of its ancestor, the campfire. When humankind, anthropologists say, when humankind discovered fire, that allowed them leisure, time that they did not have before, in order to go even deeper into ritual, courtship, and the other arts of courtesy, to elaborate, exchange knowledge, wisdom, and go to another level just because they had a couple of extra hours. And so now we're all on lockdown. It's as though we're constantly up late at night. And what's great about this gathering, everyone here listening to this are people who want to use this time constructively. And I tell you, and I affirm for you, that what we're doing right now is a continuation of what our forefathers and foremothers did around the campfire, getting together in the name of opening each other's minds.
Right.
You know, and so the Black Box is a creative space. It started as a film project that I started developing at the time when I was in that fellowship in New York. And I started, before I came to London, I started listening to you on podcasts. I told you I had an initial warm feeling about you from how you appeared practicing street hypnosis. So what attracted me was even more your attitude than some trick, because there's a lot of people out there that do these things. Very quickly, we get immune in the novelty factor to any technology. The human mind becomes immune to any technology because it's the tool of tools. So there's no tool that can outsmart our mind. We have to actually be coming from a real place. There's no protocol that's going to trick someone and open. So I saw that behind that in a real sense that street hypnosis was a pretext for having fun together. And I responded to that because film, hypnosis, all those things for me in my life are also about embracing that creative genie, the creative spirit, however it wants to show up, you know? And so I started following interviews of you, Anthony, and podcasts. Like, for instance, our friend Stuart Palm's podcast was particularly striking. I remember that. It was the winter that David Bowie died. And I lived down the street in New York from David Bowie. And Stuart Palm was respectful of that event as well. And David Bowie, in his last album, was particularly interested in his earliest incarnation for around The Man Who Sold the World, Aleister Crowley, David Bowie, came to fore, you know, practicing magic and questioning what is identity, what is incarnation, what is this message in a bottle that is this album that is almost a prophecy, and in what way is our own life a prophecy? As Bob Marley says, we got to fulfill the book. And so it's in that ambiance that I reached out and contacted you. You know, that's where we go from I'm kind of interested in flicking around to I'm engaged in a conversation, watching you on Stuart Palm's podcast. There were other podcasts, but it was a combination of you, Stuart Palm, Bowie's death, that snowstorm that was in New York that winter. And I lived down the block from Bowie's place. There was an altar to Bowie by all his fans. You had to trudge through the snow to get around there. All this created a lockdown. You know, initiatic experiences always involve lockdown. Maybe our training sessions, whether it be as yoga teachers or as kickboxing teachers or hypnotists, is where we invite people into the womb of a lockdown so that we can get concentrated on something that's growing, that's emergent, and we come out into a new quality of experience. I came out in a new relationship because you and I started chatting and we just hit it off right away because you're very open. And I responded to that. And very quickly, and this follows me all the way into this consideration that calls itself hypnosis, that calls itself ancestral hypnosis, and at that time called itself the film The Black Box. What was occurred between you and me was a real gentle relationship to these kind of words and openness. Even while talking to you, I realized that you had no final idea of what hypnosis is or could do. And we're very willing to keep exploring and allow hypnosis, so to speak, allow sociology, allow destiny to tell you what it wants to be, and trusting that. And I need that in my life. And that's why we stayed close all these times.
Yeah. And the film is an ongoing project being created in parts, and you've done part 1 and 2. That first part, the thing that we seemed to focus in on was, we touched on it already with the fire, but was creating a space for a ritual almost stripped down to a candle, perhaps a mirror. I'm not sure if that mirror is the screen, but it was a space, there was some narration and some silence. And then came this kind of invitation to almost wait and bring something back if offered by the ancestor. So I wonder if you could, again, I'm not sure if that's where you were at, but that's kind of how I interpreted that time. And what
Everyone who's listening to this interview, and you yourself, Anthony, and I myself know that I don't need to know right now if that's where I was at. We're in the space in the conversation where I trust that that's where we're at.
That's where we're at. So tell me a little more, if you would, about, the power of ritual, because, often people these days are quite quick to cut away that stuff as superfluous. I would have put myself in that category a few years ago, even with hypno, that it's not that bit that's required, that's not essential. I was on the search for what is essential. I guess I've almost come full circle and see induction as something of a ritual that we engage in together. It doesn't matter quite what form that takes, but tell me a little bit about ritual, and then let's get into exactly what you mean by the ancestor.
All right. Again, the initial ritual of all rituals was sitting around the campfire and whatever stories that take place there. The great-great-grandmother of all rituals is female menstruation. This is where humanity saw its explicit kinship with the lunar cycle, with the heavenly bodies, and with the planet, like in an analog matching way. And so this is in a way where humanity began to build all its other subsequent theologies around how do we respect the bloodstream mystery of life and regeneration.
Right.
And most every one of the traditional African societies that I've studied are matrilineal. And so most of these ritual families came out of that. And why do I mention that? Is because all of, therefore, human culture, because we're all descended of Africa, and all these traditions and sciences find their roots in things that came before, and those and things that came before that. So there's a grammar behind the grammar, behind the grammar, behind the grammar. And again, it's not so important the grammar, it's the longing for a grammar. It's like a child. They try to have language before being sure about language. There's a longing to communicate, a longing to be connected with that which came before. That's the power of ritual. That's the importance of rituals, acknowledging even that hypnosis may harm someone, may help someone. Maybe there's more at work here than I know. So it would behoove me to at least have a minimum of respect for the party I just showed up at, for the discussion I just joined. Maybe something very personal has happened to the people who are sitting around this table that I've invited myself to. Is there a way in which I can acknowledge that which has come before me? Because that is also a constituent part of my own sanity, is my sense that I'm a part of. And so ritual, I think, is important in that sense. Unfortunately, in where we're at in society, we're a very technical society. So we're going to tend to look at the rituals that those other peoples have practiced as superstitions that don't do the job well. We think in terms of protocols, lists, 10 steps to this, 4 tricks to that. I'm going to show you this and that gadget. So we treat things and people as gadgets, and we ourselves become gadgets. Then we're surprised that we still feel alienated. Where in fact, it's more a question of wanting to work with others. Like, hi, what's your name again? That's what we say when we meet someone. That's courtesy. That's a ritual. So when someone comes into our therapy space or any kind of loaded space, even a hypno comedy show or a simple comedy show, there's rituals that people can feel protected. There's a way we take for granted that a stand-up comic addresses his audience, which slightly varies from one culture to another, so that people feel safe enough to go there. So ritual is more like courtesy, but courtesy is no little thing. They talk about naming the demon. And it's also speak the name of one savior. There's variations on this theme. You know, some people talk about getting down on your knees. Is it because he said, oh, it wasn't down on his knees that he prayed, it didn't work? Or is it that doing, performing something with one's body is how we express respect in our everyday lives? And our body recognizes that. And it's very different to do that than to say, I ain't doing that. So if I come in here, wanted to really experience this comedy hypno show, being willing to have this experience, as we often say, then maybe I'm down to clasp my hands together and see what'll happen. And so already I'm participating, whereas I'm saying, I'm not gonna do that. That means I'm already not doing that. So I would say that the rituals, whether it be of hypnosis or rituals in various churches and religions, rituals in psychedelic circles. How about this? Somebody takes some mind-blowing plant or root and has some near the edge experience. It's very helpful for them to know in their intention set that they did all they could, the same way you would for a child. Not that you'd necessarily bring your child to have a near psychotic, wondrous experience, unless you were in a culture where that was an essential part of our survival, that child needed to go there at some moment, had to go it alone in order to come back and truly be a living part of. Mm-hmm. So I see that in the most important instances of human society, we need to feel that due diligence has been taken. And it's not so much a specific due diligence, it's sincerely trying to find out what due diligence is. So that's what I think the power of ritual is. It's a respect for the living being, which has already some traditions, which already has a past, already has had some experiences. Let me show a minimum of interest and respect for them. And so the film, The Black Box, to treat it with the respect that it deserves, because it's something that you and I have come together over, is recognizing that the screen has a past and a function, but that, like many other things in our current technical, wasteful, and exploitative, alienating society, the screen and its power and its antecedents have often been neglected, or let's say taken for granted. And so screens are being used for all manners of things not edifying, or in fact the power to see you right now through this screen is an extraordinary thing. And if I treat it like an ordinary thing, then I start to have a relationship to the human image, which dovetails my own experience of my own image. How about I treat this image of Anthony that's appearing in front of me with a bit of sacred respect? That's not a trick. That's not like a crossing one's fingers, except to the degree that crossing one's fingers reflects that I really respect and care about our communication. And if I do that, in the name, let's say, of all the change work, coaching, and helping that is gathered in the viewing of this podcast, this communication, this seance, this ceremony, this gathering, it is going to definitely have an immediate effect on how I relate to my own ecology. Because that's an issue we can have. We often said, some of us here are either performers or entertainers, burn out. See Pink Floyd The Wall, they start hating their audience. What happened to the little boy who loved playing the guitar and look, ma, I can play, then ends up hating their audience? How do we go from a young Marlon Brando to old Marlon Brando? In fact, he has a movie where I don't know if you've seen that movie, where he does his own self-hypnosis tapes called Listen to Me, Marlon. Yeah, fascinating thing. Maybe we could all listen to me, Anthony, listen to me, Nikki Loves. Maybe we can all do our own tapes as though we were showing respect to our own genie. We can start to treat ourselves and others with respect. And so that film was an invitation to use the viewing experience of a film to acknowledge that we are numerous here and that something is happening for us. And therein to invite the audience to own their responsibility for their own visionary capacity that is at work, a visionary function that's at work right now. We are tripping right now. We are dreaming right now. And to the degree to which you buy into that idea, if there's a party that buys in to the consideration that we are dreaming right now, maybe we'll be much more, on the contrary, much more careful where we go with it. And that can be extremely powerful and extremely healing. So I wanted to create a film that would allow people to heal, to vision, to experience guidance, all the things that are positive aspects of the human heritage through its last important cultural medium, which is the cinema, the screen, the moving image. And so since I met in you someone who had a very open and compassionate and playful, impish, playful relationship to what words do and to how change happens, that's how we became natural allies in exploring what a film can ask you to experience. So that's the black box. So it's a film that's still in process, and I'm on the second part of it. And it's also a community on Facebook with about 2,000 some members, where I post things about traditions, I post things about what we're talking about, but more on the traditional sense, like things that we might see in local peoples, the wisdom of local peoples that are still around or who were from before.
Sure. So let's now dive into the ancestor. There's a moment, I don't want to spoil it for anyone, so I don't want to unpack the final moment of part one of the black box, but very moving. And so I'll point people to that. But tell me what you mean when you say the ancestor, because again, for some, there's going to be some resistance to that straight away. For others, there's going to be absolute intrigue and, it's going to resonate. So what do you mean? Can you make a distinction between, a belief in past lives or reincarnation and what you mean with the ancestor?
I'm going to ask you straight away, Anthony, do you believe in the name Anthony?
I believe in that.
Anthony. When I call your name, you respond. And if I say to you that, Anthony, I love what we're doing here, and the work that we're doing is really saving my life during this confinement, Anthony. You know that associating those sentiments, especially if those sentiments are real, with your name is not the same as just saying, I'm loving what's happening for me in general.
No. I believe in the name Anthony. I'm not sure I can be summed up by the word Anthony.
Exactly. Yet it definitely has its function, and you have a relationship to that name. So that's not a belief, it's a response. That's why I don't believe in hypnosis, and I don't believe in beliefs. I don't believe that human beings have beliefs. I believe that the word belief is a concept, it's a way of talking. What we really mean is we respond to certain ideas. As a matter of fact, our beliefs are things we say about our responses. Like if I say, I'm an avid Dungeons and Dragons player, I'm saying that. It's not a good example. Let's take a faith. I'm a communist internationalist, and I believe in that destiny for humanity. I'm saying that. What I do about that is very different. Now, we all know that that's obvious to us all. Yet, when we talk about our beliefs, we have a lot of strong feelings, whether it be about what we perceive as our beliefs or other people's reactionary beliefs. Mm-hmm. In fact, they're reactions. They say one thing, they do another thing, they dream yet another thing. So we don't believe. We talk about our response. We talk about ourselves and our identities, and we respond. So nobody has beliefs. People have responses. And so, people respond to the word hypnosis a certain way. People respond to their own name a certain way. Again, if I say, Anthony, you're a son of a bitch, I'm going to take that risk because I know that this is a safe space. But I know that that doesn't mean, that's not indifferent to you when I say that. And if you can say, I invite you to say, Mikel, you're a son of a bitch, so that we can be sacredly fair.
Well, as the Buddha said, you offer someone a gift, they don't accept it. Who does it belong to?
When I was a kid, they used to say, he who smelt it, dealt it.
And he who said the rhyme did the crime. Yeah.
The crime. So that's a wonderful rejoinder, my dear friend. And it just goes to show things are exponential because he came back at with me 2 times as strong, just like a flashing echo. You know? Sometimes the remix and the dub plate is often more impactful than the original. And so what I was going to say is that the power of words is because they mean something to us. We are invested in the experiences associated with those words. We can never see the beginning of that. That can't be explained. That can just be acknowledged. And you can even say, we are consciousness. That feels a certain way in the body. By the way, we don't have a body. We have responses.
Mm.
And we as so-called hypnotists or any other kind of change workers are working with the way we respond. We don't have bodies. We don't have minds. That doesn't mean there's no body and there's no mind. It's like saying there's no unicorn elephant. Like, it's meaningless. But can be useful to use the word, the body, the mind. It can be useful to use the word ancestor. It means as many things as many people. We all have ancestors. I don't know if you are proud of your ancestors or if you're ashamed of your ancestors. I just use words like that just right now, we all feel something like that. Now, I don't generally work with the idea of those people, those ancestors, and whether I'm proud of them or not. It's just awakened to us, the reaction. And that reaction is what we work with because it's not a belief. I think that it's empowering because I think that using the term ancestors is more humble than using the word you're unconscious. Then we don't claim to know what is at work collectively and what is at work. So even that acknowledges that this so-called unconscious, this idea of an unconscious claims to be a technology or a map that claims not to be one at the same time. Whereas when we say ancestors, we acknowledge that any map we have of human experience was inherited from other people. So I don't claim to know who these ancestors are, but I do know.
And that was inherited via what? Parenting, culture, history? How do we interpret that? How do we inherit the map of our ancestors?
Anthony, unfortunately, the enigma is that we can't know how because the way we read is itself inherited. So we'll never know to what degree our parents, our forefathers, the people who created this matrix lied to us or not. That's why the invocation of ancestors is also a powerful one because it involves an intrinsic, umbilical level evocation of trust. Trust in that which has its being in me cellularly, in the accent of my thoughts, my turn of phrase, my posture. If I was to see you and your brothers and cousins, there'd be some things alike. There's some string I could pull where you would all dance. There'd be some part of the plant that grows, if I put the same fertilizer on many different plants, they'd all bloom in such a ways. So what I love about the ancestral frame, and our ancestors practiced the ancestral frame. Our ancestors venerated ancestors. Your Celtic ancestors, your Germanic ancestors, your Australian bush ancestors, your Chinese ancestors. To this day, you go to a Chinese restaurant, Japanese restaurant, or Hindu restaurant, and you will see acknowledgement of those that came before them. In the corner, there'll be a plate, there'll be some food, there'll be a candle, there'll be a photo. And that's not a belief. They are doing that. I don't believe that my daughter is my daughter, but I know her birthday is this month, and I want to be there to have that experience of being a good son. A good parent to her. Perhaps a good son because it came before me, because good sons make good sons. The same way hurt people hurt people. So I think that this ancestral frame is one of respect for community, respect for relationship. It's a relationship with relationship. And acknowledging that words, relationships, gestures, rituals, objects, memories, that this is a whole web of community that we find our being in.
Very nice. So you've touched on something there a few times. I've been trying to keep my lips sealed, but you used the word response a few times, and a couple of years back now, you spoke about the call and the response. I'm still kind of unpacking that, because as a notion, it's just one that stayed with me, and I use a lot, and I use that phrasing a lot when
I started using that phrasing when I discovered your exploration of what you called at the time automatic imagination. So the call of the response is also you and I growing together, and everyone who's been accompanying you and is accompanying you now. We're all learning from each other, signaling back and forth to each other. And so the idea of call and response, like automatic imagination, which might say, you know what, let's pretend we're hypnotized right now. Let's pretend that in some way we've been hypnotized throughout this entire interview. And let's focus on it. And even pretend we're not pretending. We can perform that, which is different from not performing that. It might be worth it to us to perform that. That's automatic imagination, as far as I'm concerned. And that's all that it need be, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
You know? So I'm doing a call and response with myself right now. And so I think it intrigued you because even with you don't use the word automatic imagination so much these days. And I think one of the reasons you don't is that you don't get attached to any particular protocol too long. You want to keep open about what is taking place. For the moment, both you and I are having fun with the idea of call and response because it's agnostic. It's not claiming to limit us in a particular architecture.
Part of it was a dissatisfaction with the architecture of the unconscious, and secondly, an admission that even when, facilitating change and showing people how to achieve stuff, I have to accept that I don't really quite know when that happens or even how that happens, even though I bring some techniques and some words. What call and response kind of gave me was a bit of patience. That we we put out this beat, this call into this space, and we wait, and something comes up. Even if nothing comes up, that nothing is something. So something comes back, and then we have a connection. That was one of the things that locked me onto it was the notion of let's put something out there. Let's light this fire. Let's shine this torch. Let's hit this drum, blow some smoke, do whatever, and see what comes up.
What I'm hearing there is a real respect for what's taking place between us, whoever that us is, in the interactive aspect. And we all know who've survived the hypno session, survived the hypno stage show, survived a date with someone they really care about, survived a boogie woogie on the dance floor, survived a guitar solo. That being open is really about being open responsively to what I'm thinking about myself, to what I suppose the other one's thinking, to the other one's gestures, their responses to my gestures. And so I think that this idea of dialogue is very important. Again, about the ancestral frame, I was involved in an initiatic tradition, and maybe still am. And one of the things I found most interesting was one of my mentors therein told me that when we go, into those initiatic voyages, the purpose is not to go and find myself. I need to work on myself. I need to go to find out the real me, to get in touch with my true self. Our ancestors didn't have a notion of your true self. Your Gaelic, Celtic, Icelandic, Bantu, Siberian ancestors were not trying to work on themselves. They were not trying to find out their true higher self. They were going there to meet the others. Right. There's people in there. They're going to go meet. So there's a multiplicity of experience taken for granted. That there will be Papa Smurf, Mini Smurf, Angry Smurf, Anorexic Smurf in there. I need to go speak to Anorexic Smurf. I need to work on that. And I need to honor that entity and find out what it has to say to me. And we have the elements of that in parts therapy, or even protocols like the SWAN, or any kind of idiomotor explorations are acknowledgements that we can start to work with those parts in us as parts. We start to be, like it says in the Bible, it says we are legion. You know, and it starts to acknowledge that multiplicity, which might be a much less neurotic frame than saying, I gotta find my true self. How far am I in that? Did I do it right? How about acknowledging that the part that wants to do it right is a member of the same Black Lodge as the part that doesn't give a shit about that? And the two of them can work together, are already somehow working together. There's acknowledgement that there's already a relationship taking place. The minute that there's that call and response, there is a appeal to the group conscience. You know, right now, you and I could be sensitive, even without knowing who is listening out there. We can be sensitive to where they are at in our interview. Maybe there were times in the interview that they got lost. Maybe there are times, surprisingly, that they got found. Even the words I'm using right now aren't a trick. It's to acknowledge the variety of experience, the same way when we talk to a crowd and a group of people or a family around a table for a toast. Maybe some of you know this friend of mine who's come to visit, Anthony. Some of you have heard me talk about him. Some of you haven't, but you all know that if he's a friend of mine, then he's probably a friend of mine. And so that's how we acknowledge the shared aspect of our experience. And that is much more powerful than imagining some protocol that has nothing to do with your mind, but I'm going to go use it on you. I'm going to do some trick on you in this civilization that's constantly updating copyrights and making us redundant. How about really respecting that Creative Commons, you know, and appealing to it? So again, this is not a technical thing. This notion of call and response is an honoring what's taking place interactively and staying open to it. It's respect. We want respect. If you are, let me tell you something right now, Anthony. Right now, I'm sincerely hoping you're having an open mind to what I'm saying. And I'm sure that you want me to have an open mind to what's taking place with you, not to already have a fixed idea of who you are. You want your being to be recognized, heard, felt. And I do too. And I think that's the case of anybody here. So call and response is about being a good lover of life, being a caring, compassionate, responsive lover of this life in which we find ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Good. So let's try and draw something of a circle around this thing. And let me ask you, what is ancestral hypnosis? If, you know, I was going to, or someone listening was going to engage with you over that term, what is ancestral hypnosis?
You know, I've gone a bit into the invisible while responding to you, and I think you've recognized that. And some people, maybe they've felt that. And so that, you know, the doubt frame, the shadow space. But now I'm going to answer very directly, because that too is part of call and response, is acknowledging where we're at. You know, there's a bit of let's say that every metaphor has its esoteric aspect and its banal aspect, and it's in the yin and yang of those values that is their richness. If something's too deep, we can't even grasp it. If it's too shallow, it has no roots.
Yeah.
So what is ancestral?
People are seeking you out for this. People are asking you this question, and some of them are booking sessions, and you know.
It's ancestral hypnosis in these difficult, uncertain times. Ancestral hypnosis is a means by which we can help people to learn how to communicate with their ancestors in order to get guidance, to deepen their vision, their self-trust, and their sense of connectedness. So it's a modern method in the sense that this is not so much some faithful to some lineage. It's not belonging to any particular lineage. It's an acknowledgement of insights that have come to me and come through me from a various number of traditions, including the modern ones like Gestalt, psychodrama, NLP, hypnosis, but also Haitian voodoo, shamanism, African shamanism, Gabonese Bwiti, Yoruba, Ife, trying to see what all these systems, I'm also someone who's practiced 10 years of Zen practice, practiced in the Theravada lay tradition. I've been involved in the recovery community, all those kind of group dynamics and solo explorations. So this ancestral hypnosis attempts to work with what all these things have in common, to embrace our common heritage and not try to copyright change, but to show up for the change that's happening for us. We are all the children of someone. We all are brothers and sisters of each other. We are all a tribe trying to figure out how to stay well in this vast forest. And so ancestral hypnosis responds to the problem that the person is dealing with as an entity. That's something I could say very concrete about it, is that the person, the problem state or whatever it is that they are worried about. As a matter of fact, I tend not to go into the details of their problem. Yeah. I do not consider myself the therapist with the insight that's going to go in there and do some surgery on your childhood. It's more that I consider that the person responding, again, call and response, that someone responding to something on social media or to what a friend said to them about my work, that something's already at work there. And when they come in there, it's to name, acknowledge, and work with the spirit that's in that request. And there's various protocols of the way to use language, the way to use the situation of our meeting, and the way to work with what comes up during that meeting that can deepen their connection and their respect for that spirit that's in their request.
Very good, very good. Now, I'm going to obviously include a bunch of links to your Quora, which is awesome. People need to be reading your answers to some of the big questions with regard to hypnosis, to your Insta, some of your artwork, and also the film, if you're happy me to share that link to the first part of the film.
Well, if I may, Anthony, I'd most like to explicitly put it out there to anyone who's listening to this. Maybe something in you was stimulated while listening to our interview. Contact me, free of charge, and let's engage. Best way is to go on the Calendly. It's very simple. Go on the Calendly, Ancestral Hypnosis. Anthony will include the link, and I'll meet you on Zoom just like this, and we can go into it. And I think that's the best. That's what's most impactful. So again, if anyone, when they've heard about this ancestral hypnosis, if you have a feeling there's something in there for you, let's find out what that is. And I'm open. I'm really down for that.
Brilliant. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you.
Let's continue our conversation.
Yeah, Anthony. I just want to say that as well. I want to honor your reference to the conversation. This ancestral hypnosis thing, it's really about that. It's honoring the conversation. And so I think it's wonderful that you should choose those words. I think it's auspicious. I think the auspiciousness of life is one of the wonders that we can get deeper into just by being willing to be deeper into it, just by wanting to become more intimate with how fortunate our choice of words are. It's an extraordinary thing, this conversation.
Beautiful. Thank you, man.
Thank you, Anthony. Talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.